Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear students and friends, Assalamu alaikum. Once again, this is Dr. Shahid Hussain, and today we are going to discuss another very important theory, and that is schema theory. Schema theory is not only important for the scholars of mass communication, but it is equally important for the scholars and students of sociology, psychology, and for almost all the different disciplines of the social sciences. Let me tell you that if we are able to understand this theory, that is schema theory, we will be in a better position to understand many of the important aspects of our life, including the communication, including the working of our mind in the storage of different knowledge and information in particular schemas. So it means that one concept that might add to our understanding of how people process information from the mass communication is the idea of schema. Although scholars do not agree about exactly what a schema is. Let me share that the plural of schema is schemata. And at its core, the schema theory uses the concept of a schema to understand how people think, analyze, and act on the information that is presented to them. The theory states that all knowledge or data is organized into units, and each unit is a schema. So the theory talks about the packets or the units of knowledge already stored in our mind whenever we perceive something. According to Merriam-Webster, schema is a mental codification of experience that includes a particular organized way of perceiving cognitively and responding to a complex situation or a set of stimuli. So a schema can be understood as a structured cognitive framework or plan. It tells us how our mind organizes information, knowledge, and memories. It means that the schema theory deals with the categorization of information of the world, which ultimately influences how we are going to think and behave. We can also say that a schema is a cluster of related pieces of information, knowledge, or memory that are stored in our minds. Let me tell you that schemata have immense influence on our thinking. We tend to focus on remember and believe information that is consistent with our existing beliefs, that is existing schemas. Another important aspect of the schema theory is that schemata reinforce stereotypes and also influence prejudices. And this is very important thing to understand for a better understanding of the social settings or for a better understanding of the social behavior. It is also a matter of fact that schema theory has been contributed by a number of different scholars. According to Graeber 1988, in a nutshell, schema theory is a cognitive structure consisting of organized knowledge about situations and individuals that has been abstracted from prior experiences. It is used for processing new information and retrieving stored information. Similarly, according to Severin and Tankard 2014, the concept of schemata has become widely used by psychologists, cognitive scientists, political scientists, and communication researchers because of its apparent usefulness in understanding how people process the information which they are getting from the different sources, including the mass communication or the mass media. Fiske and Kinder 1981 describes schemas as serviceable although imperfect devices for coping with the complexity. Fiske and Kinder 1981 further suggests that people are cognitive misers whose limited complexity for dealing with information forces them to practice cognitive economy by forming simplified mental models. Furthermore, Doris Graeber 1988 has done research that indicates that people use schemas to process news stories from newspapers or news broadcasts. Doris Graeber 1988 found that people processing news stories choose from a number of strategies, including state matching of a news story to a schema. For example, interpreting a political candidate. Then another strategy is processing through inferences. For example, deducing that a ceasefire in one place would not work well because ceasefires had not worked well in another place. And another strategy is the multiple integration of a story with several schemas or schema dimensions. For example, a story on school busing can be related to schemas about political participation. Then it can also be related to schemas regarding the disruption of public education or the achieving of a multicultural society. This explanation of Doris Graeber surely helps us in understanding what schema or the schematas are and how they work. Doris Graeber 1988 further found that in processing news stories, people tend to store the conclusions drawn from the evidence rather than the evidence itself. She argued that processing news through schemas is an effective means of dealing with the information overload. And this is the case to deal with the bombardment of information from across the globe in this digital era. So here, schemas help us to deal with the information overload in an efficient and smart manner. Moreover, Doris Graeber 1988 points out that the matching of news stories with schemas is influenced by queuing and notes that the mass media are a major source of queuing information. Thus, in the preceding example concerning school busing, the news media themselves can, by means of headlines, pictures, captions, and so forth, help determine whether the story is seen as dealing with disruption of education or achieving a multicultural society. Another important aspect is that this kind of queuing can also influence schema development, so that when the next story on school busing comes along, it is more likely to be related to either the disruption of education schema or the achieving a multicultural schema. In summary, the notion of schema can help us to understand how people may process many news stories. It appears that they attempt to match the information in a news story to some existing schemas through a number of different matching strategies. And if a match can be found, some part of information or inferences from the information is likely to be stored in the form of a modified schema. If a match cannot be found, the information is likely to pass without being assimilated. Now I'm going to share with you some of the important examples to make this concept more clear and more elaborate. First of all, to elaborate the concept of schema, I'm going to explain it with the help of metaphors. First of all, consider that our mind is just like a cabinet, and a single drawer or file is like a schema comprising of the related set of knowledge or information. Now take it another way. The hard disk of a computer is just like our mind, and then one folder or file in that hard disk is just like a schema in our mind, containing a set of related information or knowledge. Now, this is another metaphor to make the concept of schema easier to understand. Similarly, schema tells us how to behave in a restaurant, in a wedding, or a birthday party. So this is schema or the schemata which ultimately controls our attitude and behavior in the different scenarios, in the different situations, or in the different social settings. Another simple example is to think of your schema of a car. Within that schema, you most likely have knowledge about cars in general. For example, they need fuel to run, have four wheels, you can drive them, etc. And probably information about specific car brands, like some are expensive, some are durable, some have more safety measures, etc. You may also think of cars within a larger context of your life. For example, you use one to get to work, you have a specific one, and you probably want a better one, etc. And all these pieces of information come together to form your schema of a car. And every time you learn something new, like self-driving cars, a new model, new features, etc., you update your schema of a car accordingly. Similarly, it is schema that if we see some car coming down the street, we quickly subconsciously recall everything we know about cars. For example, don't step in front of it. That car is going really very fast, and that looks like my friend's cars, etc. Now these are the schemas which are already stored in our mind, and whenever we come across certain situations, our schemas immediately come forward, and they control our attitude and behavior accordingly. And this is not the case only for the car. We do have schemas for each and every aspect of our life, and each and every commodity or thing which are of importance in our lives, or about which we are already having set of information or knowledge in the form of schematas in our minds. Actually, schemata can categorize knowledge at all levels like ideologies, cultural truths, knowledge about meaning of a word, and even stereotype. Schemata are the cornerstones for our knowledge and decisions. Without them, quick thinking wouldn't be possible. So these were some of the examples to make it easy to understand the schema theory. Now I'm going to share with you some of the applications of the schema theory in our daily lives to further elaborate the concept and make it easy to grasp the concept. So when we talk about the application of the schema theory, in this regard, let me tell you that we always connect new information to the existing schema in order for it to make sense. Let me tell you that without schema or the background knowledge, new material is difficult to comprehend. Similarly, schema helps us in teaching kids how to read. Furthermore, schema also helps us to develop reading programs. Another very important aspect regarding the schema theory is that schemas are not necessarily misinterpretations of information, but a tool we use to perceive the world and understand the information and knowledge. So these were some of the applications of the schema theory in the day-to-day life. Now I'm also going to share with you some of the limitations of the schema theory to make it further elaborate. First of all, let me tell you that the concept of the schema theory is abstract and difficult to evaluate. Another important aspect is that a good theory should be testable. However, schema theory is difficult to test. So these were some of the important aspects of the schema theory. I hope you have understood it. If you want to get the notifications of my upcoming video lectures, do subscribe the channel and also press the bell icon. Inshallah, we shall meet again soon with another video lecture. Till that time, take care of yourself. Allah Hafiz.